Okay, thank you for letting me know that. It appears to be on. Okay. Uh, if you make contact again and they can't get on, please let us know. We'll check on the Zoom. Thank you. Thanks for letting us know that. Okay. So if you could advance the slide. Okay, just wanted to go over the Zoom, the meeting notes and procedures. This meeting is recorded. Its virtual public meeting will be recorded. Massachusetts Department of Transportation may choose to retain and distribute the video, still images, audio, and/or chat transcript. By continuing attendance with this virtual public meeting, you are consenting to participate in a recorded event. All recordings and chat transcript will be considered a public record. If you are not comfortable being recorded, please turn off your camera, keep your microphone muted, and refrain from chatting in the transcript box. Otherwise, you may choose to excuse yourself from the meeting. Your microphone and webcam are automatically disabled upon entering, and this meeting will be open to questions and answers at the end. Disclaimer, all questions and comments are certainly welcome and appreciated. However, we do request that you refrain from any disrespectful comments. Zoom controls. So for those online, the drop-down menu to check microphone and speakers on the left, ask questions to share comments, raise your hand if you'd like to share a comment. And if you're unable to access the internet or having technical problems, please call into the meeting at the following number and webinar ID. If you're having trouble, please call the 888 number on the right side of the screen here. And closed caption is automatically generated by Zoom. So those are our Zoom control slides. Thank you. So here's the agenda. Commissioner Fitzgerald called the meeting to order. We are going to do a brief introduction of the commission members. I will continue on the presentation with the study, and we're going to cover a little bit of the feedback we've received thus far and how it integrates into our work. We're going to cover what is called a future no build condition for transportation modeling, which is essentially one of our core activities. We have a build forecast, and then we test our alternatives, which is the primary presentation here tonight. And then I'm going to talk about next steps. We'll open it up to commission discussion and also public comment. With that said, I turn it back to the commissioners here to introduce themselves.
Thank you so much, Ethan. Chris Osgood, City of Boston.
John Fitzgerald, District 3 City Council.
Jake Walkman, designee for Nick Collins.
Robert Lowell, designee for Secretary Tepper.
And online, we have Representative Hunt, and we also have Frank Baker representing Rep. Beal. And so those are commission introductions. So here's our commission goals. I just wanted to remind everyone, sort of in summary, it's to improve and integrate mobility and climate resiliency in a comprehensive way for the long term, while identifying improvements that can be done more quickly on an immediate basis. Okay. So we added this in here just for the understanding that the Morrissey Boulevard Commission itself, its charge is specifically on Morrissey, but we want to ensure, and it's part of planning practice to look at facilities in a more regional context. So we don't want to look at it in sort of a vacuum or too small of a window. So we do look at it in a regional context. So this is disclaimers here just more to help people understand that while this is a Morrissey commission, we do have to look at a wider area for benefits and impacts. And so we're going to review feedback that we've received so far. I started with this tonight because we want folks to understand that we are listening and we are hearing them, but sometimes the responses or answers come later in the study process. So For example, tonight, we are going to talk about modeling in the development scenarios. I'm going to lead with that. There were concerns raised about what would happen with a change in roadway capacity on Morrissey. There were concerns at U-turns at Bianculli. We heard here at our prior meetings, as well as meeting 3.5 hosted by Councilor Fitzgerald. Need for improved active transportation access. It's definitely something that we are concerned about, we are considering, and it is incorporated through this presentation, through modeling. The bottom two, environmental considerations, noise pollution, visual, and our updates on short term. Those are things that we are not going to be covering tonight. From the environmental consideration standpoint, that's really a part that comes later in our process after we conduct more analysis. And we're just, the short-term updates, we're focused tonight on getting our, some of our preliminary analysis done with the public and with the commissioners. So we're kicking that to the next meeting. So again, leading with this slide at the beginning to instead of sort of at the end, it's almost like a next step slide. But the reason I wanted to show it is that tonight's meeting, so the last meeting, we actually had a lot of alternatives development. We showed a lot of different concepts. We heard a lot of feedback. And so as part of that feedback and what our next step from that feedback is in terms of a study process is to take those alternatives and test them. And so that is what we're calling our preliminary transportation operations analysis. We have to look at the alternatives and say, you know, do they function well or not? And so our next meeting is going to be what is alternatives analysis. We could call it final analysis, but it's definitely going to dig deeper in terms of some of those other things that people are providing feedback about: environmental, visual, air quality, safety, environmental justice, public health, things like that, that once we're able to set some of our alternatives through development process, we can then continue our analysis. So bear with me, there's a little bit of a lag on the seems to have possibly frozen, but okay. All right. So as part of alternatives development and analysis, a primary step is to conduct a process that we call a fatal flaw analysis. Involves testing the intersection alternatives that we've shown at prior meetings, especially meeting 3, using future year conditions and multimodal volumes developed through various modeling processes that the following slides will cover. But first, I wanted to give a little background. So the Boston MPO is the regional planning agency, the regional planning body in Boston. It has about 100 municipalities in it. One of its primary activities is to develop a long-range transportation plan. It encompasses a lot of different areas, but one thing that we actually take from the plan, which is called Destination 2050, is the demographic data, things like population, household, employment. That's essentially what feeds into our model because population, households, employment are what create trips, traffic, people, volume. So we take what the future expectations are and we feed them into our modeling scenarios. And this future year is referred to as the recommended plan scenario from the Boston MPO. And I'll pause right here and say that we're digging into this information because we've heard feedback from folks that, you know, what are the future housing units? What are the future employment numbers, population? Like, are you incorporating, are you considering including what the expectations are for the future. So we, and also an actual best planning practice is to, when you're doing a study, is to actually go and look at the demographic information for the corridor, because the Boston MPO's data is really at a regional level. So we have to basically look at it and decide whether we need to refine it, tweak it. So again, this demographic data serves as primary input to our regional travel demand model. And there's a 2019 base year that has been factored up to 2023, I believe it was. And then there's the 2050 future, the plan scenario that's included in the Boston MPO. So as you can see, population is expected to grow by 27%, households by 32%, and employment by 16%. And this is specific to our study area. This is not the entire Boston region, just to be clear. This is what we look at from our study perspective. And so based on this feedback, as well as this is something that we just typically do, we looked at the projections, we reviewed, and we essentially refined them. So without getting into too much wonky detail, we look at the different zones within the model, and we compare them to what the Boston MPO growth expected is, and we compare to see, what if there are any changes, and we also look at development data in the pipeline for the area, and that sort of we look at everything and try to be as reasonable as possible as to what the expectations are for the future. And so that refinement essentially added another 9,000 persons to the study area, as well as a little under 4,000 households. And this is on top of what the expected growth was at the Boston MPO level. So again, based on feedback that they were going to, I think somebody kept throwing out 10,000 housing units. So we definitely have looked at the information. And so the housing units are expected to grow by over 12,000, almost 13,000 in our model. So we feel we're effectively accounting for a lot of growth in the area. Excuse me. So with this demographic refinement of the study area, we ran the travel demand model again to develop what we call a future no build condition. The future no build, we call it a no build because it is what is expected without any major changes to infrastructure as a result of our study. It does incorporate expected changes that are pipeline to any infrastructure, but anything that we're looking at is not included in the future no build. Excuse me. No, the map is the study area. Correct, yeah. Correct. Yeah, apologies for the graphics are a little small, but so after we took the demographic data, we ran the model, and this is the result. And so with all the expected development in the northern part of the study area, you can see a lot of the larger circles represent larger developments. So no surprise that a lot of those developments are there's a lot of volume associated with them, but at the same time, a lot of them are located closer to things like Old Colony Rotary, K Circle, Cooley, Morrissey. So there's a lot of growth associated in those areas as well, based on the modeling. Sorry. Okay. So the prior slide was just the opener for the build forecast. And so we took the same refined demographic data for 2050, and we input it into what we call a build model. And this here explains essentially what our build model is. So we had to, as part of the build model, there was the Morrissey lane reconfiguration. We have done some changes to a frontage road approach, west leg, and also at the intersection of Morrissey Boulevard and Cooley. So these are things that we've been looking at in our alternatives. And so why do we do this? We do the build forecast so that we can, one, compare it to a no build condition, but also it's essentially meant to answer, and I think this comes back to the feedback we've received. Would traffic divert if you changed Morrissey's cross-section? If so, where would they go? And, essentially getting to how would Morrissey Boulevard be affected? And on the right side was our calibration effort. And so let's go back one slide. Any part of this calibration was done before we ran the model. So any model we typically calibrate, we try to improve access to transit, active modes, bicycle, pedestrian. So the regional model is at a very high level. So when we do a study, we have to calibrate at a study area level. And so we try to mimic the future conditions as much as possible from an infrastructural standpoint so that we can potentially mimic better access to transit stations, better active modes, connections to bikeways, facilities, things like that. So we also tweaked the vehicle availability to try and mimic future developments in the area having less people driving and more people taking transit or walking and biking. Thank you. Okay, so build. What does that mean? So here are, so the model essentially produces trips. And so the middle column, so you have your base year. With our middle column, that is the 2050 future no build forecast. So that is essentially the future year, refined demographics without any significant changes to Morrissey. So we have vehicle travel mode share at 21%. We have walk bike 46, transit 43%, and total 20%. But the takeaway from this slide here is that when we did our build model by improving, again, active mode access, things like that, we have an increase in walk, bike, and transit mode share. So that's the takeaway from this slide here is that our build model really tries to represent a more active infrastructure in the area and account for hopefully less vehicle ownership. And it could also be that there was a mode shift to transit based on or other modes just based on accessibility. Again, back to feedback, what would happen capacity-wise or diversions. And so with Morrissey, reconfigured to the four-lane, primarily a four-lane cross-section, two north, two south, not at intersections, obviously. There would some of the drivers that currently use Morrissey as a to say pass through may move to 93. There's definitely there's primarily a shift to 93. There are shifts to other facilities, but the model shows that there would be a major shift back to 93 from Morrissey for drivers. There could definitely be some mode shift based on the numbers that we showed on the prior slide with increase in transit mode share. But not unexpectedly, the assumption is they would be diverted back to 93. So we're getting to sort of like, with all this build model, like, what do we do with it? What's the purpose of it? So again, once we have this information that comes out of the model, we have to test the alternatives through simulation software. And, oh, sorry, Jay, go back one. So we test initially using a software called Synchro. The right side of your screen explains sort of what Synchro and Vissim are. Synchro is definitely more of a higher level intersection testing software. It's less data intensive, but we wanted to use it to bring the alternatives that we've shown in prior meetings through, again, what we called a fatal flaw analysis. Essentially, operationally, if they don't function well at all, then sort of we want to know that. It also the synchro testing also allows the traffic engineers to sort of tweak and modify the intersections in order to see if they could get them to function better, whether it be longer left turn lane. There are various ways that they can test things. So one thing I do want to note here, first off, is that we've shown a lot of alternatives in the past. We had at meeting 3.5, we heard a lot of feedback on likes and dislikes. We are showing all of the alternatives we've developed here tonight, simply because we are taking all the feedback at all the meetings we had, and that's going to work into our final analysis. So here we're testing all the alternatives, showing them to you so that we can show you essentially how they function. And very well possible that some of your likes and dislikes might be tied to function. And so seeing operational analysis, so we just want to give as much information as possible. Transit. So after we test synchro, we then step in. So next meeting, this will not be here tonight. We test through what's a software called Vissim, and Vissim is much more data intensive, and it actually blends not just vehicular operations, but it also brings in transit, bike and ped as well for the modeling side. So it's kind of like we do a high level synchro and then we work our way into Vissim, and that'll be at a following meeting, and that will essentially be the final analysis. I'm going to turn it over now to Mike, and he is going to walk everyone through the operations analysis. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Ethan. Mike Pompilli with Howard Stein Hudson Traffic Consultants on the study. So going from north to south along the corridor, first location, we'll look at alternatives is Preble Circle. And we looked at two alternatives at Preble Circle. One would be to reconfigure the circle it's there now into a modern roundabout, and the other is signalized alternative. Under the modern roundabout alternative, we would tighten up the circle a bit, formalize the approaches. Some of the legs currently come straight into the circle, allowing vehicles to ignore yield control and come in at higher speeds. So those would come in on a curve to slow down traffic entering the circle, reduce some conflict points. It would be overall a smaller footprint than the existing circle. Each leg would have two entry lanes except for Preble, which would be a single lane with crosswalks across each entry and departure with a refuge island in the middle of each approach. So one of the pros of this concept is reduced delay compared with the circle that's there now. Some of the cons, though, we found that the westbound Columbia Road and southbound Old Colony Avenue approaches kind of struggled to handle the future volume that we were projecting for 2050. And also because it's still a circle, pedestrians still have kind of long travel routes to get from one side of the intersection to another. Our second alternative at Preble Circle was to signalize the intersection. This performed more efficiently than the roundabout. There would be crosswalks provided across each legs of the intersection, mostly separated from turning traffic by signal phasing. One exception would be the crosswalk across Preble Street. Would go concurrently with southbound right turns off of Old Colony Avenue because that turning volume is relatively low. So another pro of this option compared to the roundabout is that crossing distances would be shorter. It's a much smaller footprint than the roundabout, so it would open up some additional space for active transportation and placemaking opportunities. Some of the cons we found here, the northbound left turn had some delay in the afternoon peak hour. It may take a couple of cycles to get to make that movement. And also the southbound through movement backed up a bit in the PM. So this graph compares each of the alternatives with the what Ethan was describing as the no build condition if we did absolutely nothing to the corridor compared to what's out there today. So the gray bars with the car on top is the total morning and afternoon peak hour volume that passed through the intersection. And then the blue bar with the stopwatch is the cumulative delay that all of those vehicles in the morning and afternoon peak hour experience. So you can see that the roundabout alternative has about half as much delay as doing absolutely nothing, but still pretty high, especially compared to the signal. That's for 2050. So you see that the gray bars for the alternatives are slightly lower than with the existing infrastructure. That reflects that diversion and mode shift with the lane reduction along the corridor. It's not too dramatic here because it's the end of the corridor. Our next location is First Street, which does not exist today. This will be a new roadway proposed as part of the redevelopment of 2 Morrissey Boulevard, connecting from Mount Vernon Street down to Morrissey in between K Circle and Bianculli Boulevard. It would connect also at the entrance opposite to the 3575 Morrissey Boulevard development. The first option we looked here is keeping the roadway essentially as it is today. The driveways to those developments would be right in, right out off of the service roads with no cross connection. So the pro obviously is we don't interrupt flow on Morrissey Boulevard. It continues unimpeded. Cons, we don't introduce any new east-west pedestrian or vehicular connectivity with this concept. And then the second alternative would be to create a new signalized intersection at Morrissey Boulevard and First Street. So this would reduce vehicular volume on Mount Vernon because vehicles would be able to exit the 2 Morrissey development, turn left onto Morrissey at this location. We provide new east-west connections for vehicles, pedestrians, and bicycles at this location. This would assume the service roads would be eliminated. So all traffic would be on the Morrissey Boulevard main line. So it's a smaller footprint, more space for active transportation, and less impervious surface compared with the existing infrastructure. And this is consistent with the recommendations of the Columbia Point Master Plan from 2011. The big con here, obviously, we're introducing a signal on Morrissey Boulevard. We're stopping traffic and introducing delay on Morrissey Boulevard. So again, this graph compares each alternative with the future without doing anything. There's a little more dramatic reduction in volume here with the lane reduction. Still pretty high volumes on Morrissey Boulevard. As you can see, there's virtually no delay, both with existing infrastructure and tying into the service roads because all that traffic on Morrissey is continuing through uninterrupted. We do introduce some delay with the signal, but fairly low level of delay. Still functions pretty well. The next location is Bianculli Boulevard. The first option that we looked at was based on the 2017 DCR concept for the corridor with some minor tweaks to lane configurations to handle our projected 2050 volumes. Pros, this concept basically would terminate the southbound service road near the South Line building at a signal. And then Morrissey Boulevard southbound will continue just as the main roadway. So the movements, the turn into Bianculli Boulevard and the U-turn that currently happen off the service road would happen as a U-turn or a left turn from Morrissey southbound. So the biggest change from existing conditions besides the reduction to 2 lanes each way on Morrissey. Pros here, we found strong overall traffic operations in the peak hours. We can add pedestrian and bicycle crossings on all legs of the intersection. So really good connectivity. And out of all of our alternatives, this had the smallest footprint and the least amount of impervious surface. Cons here, the southbound U-turn movement in the morning was pretty heavy, and it may take a couple of cycles to get through this signal. The next alternative we looked at is called the continuous green T. So in this concept, it's very similar to the DCR alternative, except the southbound through movement on Morrissey Boulevard doesn't stop except when there's a call for a pedestrian or a bicyclist to cross the roadway. The left turn coming out of Bianculli Boulevard would get its own 2 lanes, and those would merge into a 2-lane section on Morrissey farther south. Pros for this option, again, strong traffic operations. It's similar to the DCR concept, but with the added kind of bonus of that southbound movement not stopping as frequently. Cons here, we have a limited number of pedestrian and bicycle crossings. Because of the design of the green T, we would not be able to provide a crosswalk on the southern leg of the intersection south of Bianculli Boulevard. Again, there was delay for that southbound U-turn movement in the morning peak hour. And also because of how the left turn off of Bianculli merges in with the southbound through, there would either be a short weaving section for vehicles to access Old Colony Terrace from Bianculli, or that would have to be blocked off with a median preventing that access. So it introduces a conflict point there. And then the third alternative we looked at was a median U-turn, which would eliminate all southbound left turn movements and U-turn movements at the intersection itself and relocate those to a U-turn near the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Pro for this intersection, unlike the green T, we can again have crossings on all legs at the intersection. It reduces the number of conflict points at the intersection itself and also reduces the amount of pavement a pedestrian would need to cross because we eliminate those turn lanes from Morrissey Boulevard southbound at the intersection. Cons for this option, overall, it has higher delay than the other alternatives because we're introducing yet another new signal to the south for the U-turn movement. And also one concern that was brought up at the last meeting, I know, was having vehicles idling to turn at the U-turn intersection, and also this would require a wider pavement area, more impervious surface to accommodate the U-turn. So yes.
If you could read that, break the blue caption on that slide.
It says entering traffic will be prevented from accessing Morrissey Boulevard northbound to discourage new cut-through traffic. So if you're coming out of Old Colony Terrace and turning, right onto Morrissey Boulevard, there would be a barrier, so you couldn't cut across the 2 lanes to get into the U-turn. So again, here's a graph comparing volumes and delay for each of our alternatives compared with doing nothing. All 3 alternatives perform fairly similarly. The median U-turn had a bit higher delay and also a few more cons. This is flipped. The median U-turn has more cons and fewer pros than the continuous green T and the DCR, which perform slightly better and do not have that wider pavement area south of the intersection. The next location we looked at is Freeport Street and Victory Road in combination. The first concept that we looked at, again, is based on the DCR concept from 2017. The biggest change here compared with what's out there now is that southbound left turns would be prohibited at Freeport Street, and they would be relocated to Victory Road. So there would be no left turn southbound coming off the Beeds Bridge. You would continue to Victory Road, where there would be a new signal, which would allow left turns into Victory Road and northbound U-turns. Access coming from Victory Road would still be a right turn only, and there'd be a new crosswalk across Morrissey Boulevard at Victory Road. So the pros, reduced delay compared with doing nothing. We reduce the number of vehicle conflicts at the Freeport Street intersection because we're getting rid of those left turns. Also, unlike the phasing today, eastbound and westbound Freeport Street would have their greens separately. So you wouldn't get stuck making a left turn off of Freeport Street westbound, kind of in the middle of the intersection like you do now, fighting with that heavy eastbound left. And like I said, we would provide a new crosswalk at Victory Road, so a new east-west pedestrian and bicycle connection there. Cons for this concept, we found that the northbound left turn and westbound Freeport Street could get congested in the PM peak hour and take 2 or 3 cycles to get through the intersection. Second alternative that we looked at here, we're calling alternative 1, since it's not the DCR concept, would be another median U-turn concept. This would eliminate all left turns at the Freeport Street intersection and relocate them to new median U-turns to the north and to the south. Pros for this concept, again, reduced delay compared with the the future volumes on the existing corridor, and even fewer vehicle conflicts at Freeport Street compared to the DCR concept because all left turns would be taken out of the intersection. Cons for this option would be more total delay than the other alternatives because again, now we're introducing two new signals for each U-turn to the north and south. The median U-turns themselves require a larger footprint and more impervious surface, so it makes it less environmentally friendly and less friendly for pedestrian and bike connections. They would have to go around those bulb outs for U-turns. And this would keep the Victory Road intersection essentially as it is now, just a stop control on the service road with no new east-west pedestrian connection at that location. The next alternative is using Victory Road and Freeport Street as a quadrant roadway. This is very similar to the DCR concept, except again, all northbound and southbound left turns are eliminated at the Freeport Street intersection. So the southbound left turn, just like in the DCR concepts, relocated to Victory Road. The northbound left turn, you would make a right turn onto Victory Road and then a left onto Freeport Street, using those roadways kind of as a jug handle to continue west onto Freeport Street. Pros for this concept, again, reduced delay compared with the scenario leaving the existing infrastructure in place. Reduced vehicle conflicts at Freeport Street because of the elimination of those left turns. And this also provides the east-west crosswalk at Victory Road like the DCR concept. Cons that we found here, operations were challenging northbound along Morrissey Boulevard in the morning. And the eastbound and westbound Freeport Street approaches had some backups in both the morning and afternoon peak hour. And the final alternative we looked at Freeport and Victory would be a full signalized intersection at Victory Road, eliminating the service road, the southbound service road, and connecting Victory Road across Morrissey into the neighborhood. Pros with this concept would be would provide new east-west pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular connections between Victory Road to the east and the neighborhood. We had new access from I-93 directly to the neighborhood via Victory Road instead of going around via Freeport Street. We would eliminate the southbound service road, reducing impervious surface, freeing up space for active transportation and placemaking, and again, reducing conflicts at the Freeport Street intersection as those left turns would be prohibited and the movements would occur via Victory Road. The cons here be that Freeport Street eastbound still has some backups in the PM peak hour, and southbound Morrissey Boulevard also had some challenging operations in the PM peak. So comparing volumes and delay at this location, again, there's a reduction in volume in 2050 with our lane reduction due to mode shift and diversion off the corridor. All four of these concepts operate significantly better than the corridor with the existing infrastructure out there. Again, the median U-turn has some slightly elevated delay due to the introduction of two new signals. And the full intersection at Victory also has slightly higher delay compared with the DCR concept and quadrant roadway concept because of the new signalized intersection there. Then at Deposit Circle, it's the final location where we looked at alternatives. We really only had one alternative here, similar to the concept proposed by DCR in 2017. That concept added a westbound connection under I-93 on Neponset Avenue, but only from Gallivan Boulevard northbound to the Morrissey Gallivan southbound intersection. The westbound lanes coming off the bridge all still had to turn right onto Morrissey northbound and go around the circle. So the change that we made here connects the westbound Neponset Avenue approach coming off the bridge to that westbound connection under 93. So traffic coming off the bridge that's continuing west on Neponset Avenue or south on Gallivan Boulevard no longer has to turn right, go around the circle. They can now continue straight under 93. Pros with this concept, it reduces the volume weaving up in Neponset Circle because of that new connection. Every intersection now has crosswalks across all legs of the intersection with phasing, protecting them from conflicting vehicular movements. And it improves ADA accessibility, which right now is pretty poor throughout the circle. Cons here, really a big driver to congestion in Neponset Circle is the vehicle queuing off of the I-93 northbound on-ramp, particularly in the morning. That would still be there, but this would provide some improvement since we would be reducing the volume on Morrissey northbound at that location because the vehicles who are continuing west and south would no longer have to interact with that 93 northbound volume. Again, this compares the volume and operations with the existing infrastructure with the concept. Not a huge improvement here, but some reduction in delay. A lot of that is driven by very heavy movements coming northbound off of Gallivan Boulevard, turning right onto Neponset Avenue, going into Quincy, which really isn't affected by the corridor project and would still be there under future conditions. Okay, so just to wrap this up, some key takeaways from our analysis. The synchro analysis gave us some insights into all of these concepts and gave us some indication on whether there are any fatal flaws. We uncovered pros and cons for each alternative based on operations, as well as geometry and ped bike connections for each location. We'd like to get your feedback on these, and then we'll take that back, put this into VISM as Ethan had described, which will show how these locations all interact together as a corridor and also interact with not just vehicular operations, but also with pedestrians, cyclists, and transit. I'm going to turn it back to Ethan to discuss our next steps.
Thank you, Mike. So I'm going to cover a little bit of next steps before we get in, opening up the floor to commission discussion as well as public discussion. Excuse me. The reason I want to do this is to, I would say, let's say, better guide the conversation just to understand what our next steps are. And so feedback and comments can understand where we're going in our next few meetings. So we are here, the orangish triangle. So we went through our alternatives development spring into summer. We're doing our preliminary analysis. We're holding commission meetings, and we've done additional outreach activities. We've done a site walk. We had meeting 3.5 that Councilor Fitzgerald hosted as additional outreach. And so from here, as Mike noted, we take the feedback that we've heard throughout the process, as well as our technical analysis that we've just recently completed. And we are going to do what we call our alternatives analysis. It's essentially final analysis. This will include environmental, again, I noted earlier, safety, public health, mobility. So it'll dig deeper into the alternatives that we've been developing thus far, but we didn't want to bring the analysis too far without making sure that the alternatives that we've developed can essentially function. So that's we saw here tonight so far is that most of them function. Some function at better levels than others, but generally none of them function worse than the existing infrastructure under future conditions. And we have 3 meetings left. The commission voted to extend the process, the deadline, and so there were 4 meetings that were added. Today is the first one. Our next meeting, we're going to do our final alternatives analysis, come back to the public and the commission and present, take feedback, and then the final 2 meetings, flexible, but to some extent we'll have to come back after we've done our analysis, feedback, and have some level of recommendations or key findings, takeaways, and then a final commission meeting to vote, approve. It's the prerogative of the commission, and that final meeting would be to essentially decide what goes to the legislature as part of our charge. And public engagement all along the bottom. Okay. Can you go back one slide? No, sorry, the other way. Okay, so open up the commission discussion, but before we open it up fully, another slide. Keep going, Jay. Yeah, so this slide is just to sort of help the conversation along. Sometimes we say, okay, open it up. So this is to help the conversation. We want from the commission and public, ultimately general comments or questions on our alternatives development or the operational analysis we've shown. We want to hear what people like, don't like, which alternatives they think should be advanced into our final analysis. Okay, we will, so no matter where I press that thing, there we go. And so we've also consolidated the alternatives into called cluster slides of, so each location, the alternatives from each one are on an individual slide, so we don't have to backtrack through the conversation. And so with that said, we can open up to commission. I see Rep. Hunt has his hand raised there on the screen as well. So.
Yeah. We'll take it from me. I'll call on Representative Hunt in a second, but I'm glad you broke it down this way. Mr. Osgood and I were just talking about this discussion and questions could have an opportunity to get really all over the place with all the different sections of it. And people probably have a lot of questions, and I don't want to jump from Preble Circle to Neponset Circle and back into the middle and everyone. So there's a great idea of focusing on each one. And I think what we can do is see if the commission has any questions on this, see if the community has any questions, and then we'll just move to the next section. And maybe at the end, sort of have any general questions that are left unanswered throughout that to go forward. Does that seem all right with you guys? So I'll turn it over to Mr. Osgood, my left, or anyone on the commission that may have questions regarding the Preble Circle alternatives. Everyone's good there?
Representative
Rep. Hunt does have his hand up. So Representative Hunt.
Hi, thanks, Mr. Chairman. And appreciate this meeting and the commitment for further meetings. I would just make a note that, the whole kind of discussion through the DCR process of dropping to 2 lanes was to allow for the addition of multiple U-turns. And their analysis was U-turns before, well, coming up northbound to Freeport Street, have a U-turn or the dedicated signal prior to Freeport Street, and coming southbound to allow the Savin Hill and Jones Hill and other communities that exit Old Colony that U-turn. The discussion wasn't to eliminate the being Cooley U-turn going southbound. And I don't think it makes sense at all to not allow the Savin Hill community to exit through Old Colony at that U-turn. And I think that's why they had proposed the U-turn closer to the yacht club without changing much of the infrastructure in front of the Globe and BC High. So maybe you could get into some of the thought process there, because again, going northbound to then make a U-turn after Freeport Street, in the afternoon, you'd be fighting traffic and you would never get out and never get to Freeport Street. And at the same time, sending all of those left-hand traffics through left-hand movements at Freeport Street northbound to Victory would just exacerbate what's already an extremely difficult situation for the Clam Point community with cut-through traffic. And I think the DCR analysis in 17 did a lot to alleviate the traffic going in and out of the neighborhood. So those are my main concerns at this time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative. I think you guys want to save those in for when we get to that section. Right, do you guys understand his questions? And can I address them? Is there anything you want to address briefly now before we sort of move through?
Do you want to wait?
I do might do one on the left turns.
Go ahead, yeah.
So just to explain, and I don't know if you can still see the screen, Representative Hunt, and you'll note the call out, right? So we had actually heard last time a concern that by opening up the ability for folks from the neighborhood to come out and get going north on Morrissey by going right and U-turn may make the neighborhood more prone to have more cut through traffic coming from points further west in Dorchester. I think that call out box is kind of a design detail for if this concept were to move forward, we would continue to work with the pros and cons of that.
I mean, I was at the meeting. I didn't hear that. Maybe you got it through email or something else, but.
I was at the meeting. This is Jake Walkman. And I just want to jump in there and say, we were all at the meeting. It was a great meeting, 3.5. And I think there was very good consensus around not doing that U-turn in front of the memorial. I believe someone said, putting it in front of the memorial, that's just rude. That's maybe one of the many reasons not to do it. Cut through being the other, idling traffic in front of homes being the other. And I was initially kind of disappointed to see that that was mathematically the best one, but it seems like that was actually in error. And this is not actually your recommended option. So I think the community was very, very clear at this 3.5 meeting that U-turn was not something that they wanted. And we have other people in the room who can do attest to that. Yep.
Great. So let's just make sure folks don't have any questions about Preble, about the first one. I don't think there was much from the commission on it. So just to know that we probably can move on to being Cooley officially, right? But I just want to make sure there's no questions from the audience about Preble. One. Then. The which slide? Yes, so I think they're gonna, right, and as we know in previous meetings, they've discussed Kosciuszko Circle. I know it doesn't make a ton of sense to us, right, but it is under a separate project under MassDOT, and you guys are keeping us abreast of what is going on with that project. So do you perhaps have a quick, or is there gonna be at any point today, any update on that project? Because obviously that hinges upon everything that we're talking about for the rest of the day.
Yeah, we're not showing anything on Kosciuszko Circle today. It's a separate project, as Councilor Fitzgerald noted. The reason it's a separate project is because it's actually further along than we are, meaning it's in the project development process. And the project team is going to be going out in the fall to the public to start their process with engagement. From a modeling standpoint, I asked the same question. And from a regional modeling standpoint, the Columbia Road interchange in K-Circle area is going to carry the same capacity in the future under our scenario and under what the project does. So the point is, it can be windowed out of our process. And so we are looking at it without K-Circle, but it doesn't affect our analysis. And that project will be, the team will be coming out in the fall.
Ethan, can I ask at what point, or what month time do we expect the two to converge and sort of the data to be combined?
Yeah, so obviously our process ends towards the end of this year, and their process starts. Their process is going to take time. So we'll be feeding our information into their process in terms of what our modeling showed and volumes. And so, yes, in the future, after we're done and once they are rolling, and so they will be integrating all the information that we essentially have been producing.
But no ballpark timeframe, because we don't know what the public process for the Kosciuszko Circle public process will be at this point.
Correct. And we haven't gotten to a point where we have our information either. So it's hard to sort of tell when that transfer will occur. But on our biweekly meetings, the project management team of the K-Circle Columbia Road Interchange project sits in our meetings. So we are actively coordinating with them right now.
Great. To move, I know First Street was also mentioned, Preble Circle / First Street. Anyone on the commission have questions on First Street? Before we get to being Cooley, Mr. Osgood.
Thanks so much, Counselor. Both sort of a question and a comment. I really would love to hear members of the public's take on the signalized alternative here. It does seem to be aligned with some of the feedback we have heard about more opportunities for the local community to be able to get from one side of Morrissey Boulevard to the other, which consequently makes it seem like very worthwhile to advance to the Vista and sort of the next level of analysis. And I think that'd be sort of our preference, but we'd love to hear comments here. It also seems to allow for the build out of a transportation network and thinking about the other east-west streets in this area that can be able to support what would be growing in this area over time. But would love to hear any thoughts from members of the public about these two alternatives, the idea of a fully signalized intersection versus one where it would only be right in, right out off of First Street.
And I think briefly before we do, I just had one other question about this, but I sort of know the answer, but I just need you to explain again. The first on First Street, especially option 1, shows less cars on Morrissey than existing. And I think for some of us here, it might just be a little hard to swallow. How is there less cars than existing with all future development that we anticipate to occur? Could you just try to explain? 'Cause I want to trust it, but right now, how are we going to put X amount more units, X amount more jobs, more office space, and then show? I know we talk about, well, folks may take the T, but I also have a question about what data are you using with the T in flux, albeit improving, and we very much appreciate that. But how do we know exactly what those numbers will be to take cars off the road in the future?
It essentially boils down to the cross section of Morrissey that was modeled, and so by having less capacity, similar to the GPS apps we use, Waze and other Google Maps and things like that, it's going to take you path of least resistance. It's going to take you with less congestion. So if it's going to, the road itself is going to have less lanes, so the model assigns less volume to it, because people that are going to choose to Morrissey as a bypass, they're going to say it's no longer a bypass for me. I'm going to shift back to 93 in theory, as well as the other refinements we did in the model encourage access to transit, walk, bike. So there is a mode shift, but there's also a diversion off Morrissey assumed in the model. You know, we understood, I think at the beginning of this process, there was the conversation about what the cross section of Morrissey would be. So we're here to sort of test what we think the modeling would show with the reduced cross section.
And if it sort of relates to that, but I notice everything has the red dotted line around it. It says with lane reduction in the results that you show for each section. Was there any concept that could be tested that kept 3 lanes, and was that tested? I know most of them with the U-turn, you have to take the 3rd lane out to show some of the examples. So I understand that it can't be 3 lanes, but were there any possibilities where 3 lanes could exist? Not that I want to go from 2 to 3 to 2 or anything like that, but was that ever tested? Or
yeah, so it's there in our analysis, we do have the existing infrastructure condition.
Yeah.
So that is the future no build. Those are the volume. Yeah. So just leave it on one of the bar charts, please.
I'm just saying there were no alternatives that had 3 lanes, different from existing condition.
Correct. We did not run any build alternatives. I'm sorry. We have the existing infrastructure, which has the 3-lane cross section, comparing it to the build with 2 lanes on either direction.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
plus
we
the
did
part
not
of
run-
that is that we're also accommodating additional pedestrian walkways and the bike lanes and things like that. So those are part of the goals of the project as well. So we incorporated all those things, and to do that, you had to eliminate the lanes.
No, I understand. Back to Chief Osgood's question here of wanting to hear from the community about anyone with the First Street alternatives. So
And we have a floating microphone, so please
there
wait
was
for the
one hand
microphone.
up, I thought.
Did you want to go to Frank Baker, who raised his
Yeah,
hand?
Frank has his hand up, please. Yeah, the commission. Sorry, I can't see that.
Oh,
Go ahead, Frank.
hi. Sorry, I'm just having difficulty. I'm on the phone in the car here. I apologize for not being in person. I just think so. One thing about the and I know we're on Preble, I think just to sum up Preble, I think to me, just looking at it, it looks like the signalized solution would be the best. But what I want to talk about is the U-turn. I think when we walked it, it didn't seem there was enough space for the U-turn. I don't, and I'm still kind of weighing my thoughts of if the U-turn is the right thing to do or not. Not really sure. Still, I want to work through it. But I think with all of these options to go from Preble all the way to Neponset, we should be focused on. And I think this talks about what Dan was talking about. Is I think it's most important to take into account what the neighborhood needs. We have to remember this is a neighborhood, Dorchester neighborhood, that's been cut off from the waterfront my entire life. So I think the connections west to east are most important. And I also think that taking into account the local traffic should weigh much heavier than the traffic that's cutting through from wherever it is, south or north. The reality is we don't have any. When the big dig happened, we got rid of any sort of on ramps to get down to the South Shore. So everybody's cutting through South Boston and Dorchester to get there. So I just want to prioritize, first of all, the people that are living here to be able to traverse Morrissey Boulevard, and also the local traffic. If that makes sense to people. And again, I'm in my car looking at my phone, little screen sort of thing. So trying to do the best I can. I apologize for not being there in person to weigh in a more valuable way. But it seems like the continuous theme is that if we don't do anything, everything gets worse. So anything is better than existing conditions. So I'm excited about that in one sense, but I'm concerned that we need to prioritize, again, west to east connections. And what I don't see, and it's the most difficult part of it, is the west to east connection that is at JFK Station. That is an absolute nightmare. We talk a lot about communities that have been adversely affected by government decisions. Now that highway was put in 1951 or 1950 when my family was living there, and we were totally cut off from the highway. So, and not looking to make this commission have more work, but how do we make connections down at JFK Station, Columbia Station? How do we get the people that are in Crescent Ave, which in the next 5 to 10 years are going to have a 200-foot wall put at the highway there? How are we going to make life better for those people that are living in those communities? And I think what I'm trying to lay is a little bit of groundwork of what happens in an expounded commission, in a larger commission. How do we get west to east in a real way? You know, how do we get there pushing a baby carriage, basically? I hope those comments made sense.
Yes, most definitely. Yeah, part of our future analysis is definitely the next step is to look at connectivity and assess the different alternatives based on connectivity.
And also, Ethan, not to beat a dead horse, but like at some point, this commission here needs to be clued in on to where we are on Kosciuszko, because I think Kosciuszko is maybe the conversation where we can have about the St. Margaret's community, the Columbia Road, the Crescent Ave area. How do we get from Crescent Ave, Columbia Road, St. Margaret's to Carson Beach, and those sorts of amenities that are coming to us? And Ethan, if I can have one more question, I put it in the chat, but I didn't hear anything. When you had your projections of, I think it was 13,000 new housing units and the amount of people, what is your time frame in that? Is that a 15-year projection, or is that 10 years? Do you have it? Can you answer that?
That was 2050, the year 2050, 50.
Oh, yeah, so 25 years. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thanks, Frank. So why don't we take back to Mr. Osgood's original question? Go ahead, man, from the.
If you could state your name too, it'd be
Sure.
appreciated.
Celine Angier. Question on the first street here. Is there a left turn? Or is that tied to the U-turn further south? When you're coming south off K Circle to this, how are you getting to First Street on the left?
There would be left turn.
Okay.
Admittedly, it does look like they're prohibited based on the straight left, the through movement.
Yeah, you get some just in the straight arrow there, so it's a little confusing.
Yeah.
And what's the distance between K Circle and First Street at that point? And like car congestion, backup with the signal, no flow through.
Can you answer all that into a mic just so the people online get it?
Sorry. Yeah, so yeah, just to repeat, our analysis did assume that left turns would be allowed from Morrissey onto First Street into the two Morrissey and 3575 Morrissey developments. And off the top of my head, I'll say it's probably 800 to 1,000 feet south of K Circle. Based on what we're seeing, it would not be affected by queues coming from K Circle.
Keep the mic. Mike.
At any point, are you going to have motion models so we can take this from a 2D, like, oh, that's a nice little map, to like, where these cars are going and how they're operating
Yes.
the flow?
Yes. VISIM is, I believe it's short for visual simulation. So yeah, there is a, please go ahead, Jess.
Yeah, hi, Jessica Litza, traffic engineer. We're trying to eliminate some of these alternative first, and then the VISIM model is more corridor long. So that's where you get more of the travel time down the corridor, more of that visual queuing. It's kind of our next step. So we're hoping to like pare down and then dive into that next level of detail.
I just want to jump back in also. I just measured it here on an aerial. It's more than a quarter mile to K Circle.
It's about 1,200 feet.
My name is Bill Varnell. My name is Bill Varnell. Could you go back to the no build slide for me, please? The table. I think it was a bar chart.
Oh, you're asking for the bar charts of which location?
The no build. What you call no build, I think.
The bar charts are the operational analysis for the intersections. The no build is a table. Do you want the demographic data for the?
Unfortunately, one point you had a no build.
It was, yeah.
I thought I heard that we were going to go from 3 lanes on Morrissey to 2. And it looked to me like in the bar charts that the amount of traffic per lane would actually be higher than the current amount. And it seems to me that if the per lane amount is higher, all that means is you have to go faster to get through it.
So the left side for these charts, the
Inside, there's a smaller box, I guess, of some sort. I can't really tell, 3 bars to the right. Is that on the far left, 3 lanes, and inside the other 2 lanes each?
Yeah, the far left is existing infrastructure, so that would be no build. And then everything within the dotted red line would be 2 lanes. That is a width of lane reduction, and that'll show you the time difference that happens when you reduce to 2 lanes.
But I'm talking about volume for a moment. It appears to me that there's more traffic per lane when you go to 2 than 1. And I don't understand how you can make that traffic flow without it being faster or something. I mean, I know that you're planning on getting people to decide that Morrissey Boulevard is no longer a cut through and has to stay on 95 or 93. 93 is the biggest parking lot in New England. And I don't know why people would get on it.
Yeah, so the 2 lanes in each direction is what we're proposing along the corridor section. So when you're just driving along the road, at the intersections, we are often proposing additional lanes, so additional turn lanes to add capacity and improve safety so that we're controlling when the turns are going, making sure that we're managing conflicts of vehicles turning against pedestrians, other vehicles. So a lot of the intersections are not 2 lanes in each direction. So that's how we're able to provide that capacity. And to your point about speed, the lane reduction actually really supports slower speeds because wider roadways tend to encourage faster speeds. People feel more comfortable driving them faster. And then outside of those peak periods when traffic's light, you know, I think everyone knows from Morrissey today, you can hit a high speed pretty easily without realizing it because it's kind of just a wide open, empty roadway. So this design also encourages more safety 24/7 as opposed to just during those peaks when you need the additional capacity. It's a better balance between the two.
Thank you. I'm Andy Donovan on Savin Hill. I know as was just mentioned, 93 is the big gorilla in the room. Is it within the scope of this commission to try to improve that in any way to maybe, because it is the alternative to Morrissey? Is there any way to include, I don't know how you fix the road, is there any way to incorporate changes to 93 that would be more amenable to getting traffic onto it?
Short answer is no, that wasn't part of our charge. The charge was to see what happens to Morrissey and the area connecting facilities of it, if we were to provide a lane reduction alternative.
Thank you.
Bill Venus, just regarding that intersection, you know, one of the cons was that it would put more delay, but it seems like, at least for northbound traffic, the delay only gets you into the queue to get into K Circle. So what difference does it make?
Thank you for your comment.
Mary Canassis from Savin Hill. I want to go back to Chris Osgood's question about the First Street. I think any east-west connections across the boulevard are great. They can slow some traffic down. I like to look at the boulevard as a place I would be able to walk, and I don't feel comfortable walking today. So we talk a lot tonight in these alternatives about the roadway and what it's going to do for cars. Wish that you would give equal weight, or at least 25%, 30% weight to the pedestrian experience, because it is another lane of traffic. And given all the development we expect to see here and the ability to get over to the resources such as the beach or to the other institutions on the east side of the boulevard, it's important that we look at the lanes of pedestrian and focusing on that a little bit more. And I really don't see that here. We know we're going to have bike lanes and sidewalks, and there have been some improvements to the sidewalks. I still have some questions for Robert Lowell later, maybe, because we had a great walking tour earlier this spring with Jason Santos, but there's improvements and short-term things that could be done. Thank you.
To sort of, guess very short answer or directly answer, this part of this step in the process was to examine traffic operations, volume operations. So the next step in our process is to, through metrics, look at bicycle, pedestrian, as well as vehicular. So yeah, this step was really just to sort of operationally, if if intersection treatments don't really work in terms of vehicular, it didn't really make sense to sort of carry anything forward. So it was really meant to test them initially, and then we'll look more closely at other modes next. It's sort of a great, thank you.
Hi, Selena from Savin Hill. We've been talking a lot about bike lanes, and I know the last few meetings it was brought up. Do we really need north and south bike lanes on both sides of the road? Can you give us information why we have both and what data is behind that? Because I know in the past we've talked about it only on one side. And a second quick question is, have any of the emergency medical services been contacted on what kind of effect will changing Morrissey Boulevard from a 3 to a 2 lane have on emergency responses in the area?
So to answer your first question, your second question first, no, we have not engaged emergency services yet. We're at a conceptual stage right now still, so we don't necessarily engage until a little bit further along in the process. But from a bike lane standpoint, we have, while this is a DCR facility, we are looking at it from MassDOT's design standards, and it requires bike lanes on either side of new construction unless you request a waiver. So it's part of, we have many policies. We have a healthy transportation compact. It's our design standards. It says a bunch of different things that that require us to provide bicycle infrastructure, and it's also the right thing to do in terms of active mode. The waiver process it's during project development. So it would require submissions to the chief engineer at MassDOT. They'd have to make exceptions. They'd have to justify why you would only want a bike lane on one side of the facility versus both sides. So there's a very laid out process. I'm not overly familiar with it. We do have engineers that could tell us, but I think I covered just enough of it. So there is a process, but it's in project development, not right now during planning.
Ethan, we had Maria Lyons who raised her hand online.
Sure.
I think she's unmuted now.
So we're going to take an online verbal.
Hi, this is Maria Lyons. First of all, have you conducted a study as to the capacity on Route 93 in the future? Because like someone mentioned, it's already a parking lot. So it seems unfeasible to say they'll go on 93 because I don't think there's any room. And also, I'm looking at the picture of the First Street Alternative 1 signalized control where you take away the service road. How are you going to join up the road coming from Old Colony that goes by JFK Station with the ramp coming down? It doesn't show how that happens there. So that's a little disconcerting. And like Frank Baker was saying, you have to think of the neighborhoods here, and the neighborhood people use the service roads to go in and out of the markets and so forth all along the boulevard. It does make it a little easier. I know if you travel on 3A, where it's the same type of thing, it's down to 2 lanes. To get in and out of the shopping areas, they have stoplights everywhere so that people can get in and out of the stoplights. So unless you add stoplights at all the markets, it's going to make it very difficult to get in and out of them for the local people who shop in those areas. I'm also concerned, this is getting ahead. I don't know whether I should talk about this now or wait and come back on later, but that was my comments about this section.
Okay. As far as your first question about a study of 93, we have not, I'm not aware of a study that has specifically looked at 93 in terms of its future capacity. Understanding 93, it's an interstate, it's meant to carry regional traffic. I think part of our process, again, as noted, it was to look at what would happen if you reduced Morrissey. And so the model assumes it would go back to 93. Now, I think we can all see 93 is often a parking lot, but with the model, the model looks at, it's a daily model, but it breaks it into different time periods. And so there is the ability within the model to spread the peak. And pre-COVID, that's what essentially happened with 93 a lot. It was congested at longer periods of the time. People would shift. So shift their time period to try to either come in early or later. So yes, 93 is very congested, but peak spreading is essentially a lot of what happens. And I'm going to turn it over to Jess, our traffic engineer.
Yeah, I was just gonna briefly add that while we're not specifically using micro simulation like we are along Morrissey to look at improvements, 93 was captured in the travel demand modeling, like Ethan mentioned. So the volumes along 93 and the capacity, the general lane capacity of 93 was factored in the model's balancing of the future growth that occurs.
Yeah, I think the sort of a layman's terms means that if the model's assigning the volume to 93, the model assumes it can handle it at some level. And again, peak spreading or because they don't look at it in a 15-minute increment or an hour increment. It's a 3-hour time periods in the morning and afternoon and midday and overnight. So there's different points in the model that we can look at it. So it does reassign back to 93.
There's also the question about the service roads.
Wants to handle that one?
We did look at some alternatives that eliminate the service roads and others don't. So we did want to look at both of those. But I know there was also a question about further up the line. Do you want to repeat that again, Maria? Did we cover that?
Why don't we do this? But before we go on, because we're doing a great job of focusing just on the section of Morrissey in front of us and not jumping around a ton. Why don't we just, are there any more questions about the First Street alternative before we go on?
Or I don't want to put words into the prior person's mouth, but I think I understood the point she was getting at there, just because it came up in meeting 3.5. Also, my name's Glenn. And it was that, so we know that Kosciuszko Circle is excluded from the study area of this, but when we looked at the maps, like in that meeting, we saw how also like that the lower roads, the roads that essentially run under the southbound exits from Kosciuszko Circle and the roads that service JFK Station, Star Market, and those areas were essentially kind of not being talked about by either group. They weren't a part of the Kosciuszko study, and they also haven't been pictured in these alternatives. So I think I understand her question is like, how do we link up those like lower elevation roads with this kind of higher elevation ramp that's coming off Kosciuszko? Because we kind of, in these pictures, we're skipping south of that, and we're just assuming there's sort of a way that, yeah, the people exiting from Star Market have gotten onto the main drag here, but we sort of, it sort of seems like in the maps we've seen so far that actually, we haven't seen any alternatives about how those work.
Okay, no, thank you for that feedback. So we need to do a better job, obviously, showing the connected points. And admittedly, the next, I know it sort of sound like a broken record, but part of our next step is to look at those types of links. And we would have a break point up near K-Circle, meaning where our study would match up. So, we have to, thank you for the feedback. Where we go back to the office, so to speak, and we develop the analysis, we'll make sure to pay attention to where those connections are. And admittedly, part of our process is to take these intersection concepts, understanding the lane configuration of Morrissey, and then building the corridor in a conceptual way. We had to go through these steps. And so it's good feedback for exactly right now, because we essentially now have to build what those connections are going to look like as part of concepts. So thank you.
Ethan, why don't we go into being Cooley?
Sounds good.
Because we still have being Cooley, Freeport, and Deponsit Circle with about a half hour to go. And so I want to make sure, because I know I have a question on being Cooley. I don't know if anyone else in the commission does on this section, but my question was, I know you said there would be some sort of wall so that folks couldn't get over to the U-turn, and I believe it was being Cooley Alternative 2, right? The U-turn one, that there'd be some wall coming out of Old Colony Terrace, where, so if I'm living in Savin Hill and I'm coming out of the back of Savin Hill on Old Colony and I can only go right and I can't get over to the U-turn, how do I go north? I think folks would just like to understand that if this does ever become the alternative, or if we push back. But how do you anticipate someone, a resident of Savin Hill, taking a right out of Old Colony Terrace, but wanting to go north?
So I don't misspeak, I'll turn it over to Mike to make sure it's accurate.
Sure.
that movement would be down at Victory Road in this concept, or would have to be elsewhere through the street network.
So how, just give folks an idea of how far they would have to go down Morrissey to make the U-turn?
I'm not sure the exact distance.
I was just trying to
Yeah, it's
get it, put a number on it.
It is a
Half
bit
mile?
direction.
It's a long, it's a long way. I agree. Just wanted to make something so we could compare it to.
Understood.
But thank you. Anyone else on the commission, please?
Yeah, building on that, in the original 2017 DCR plan, there was a U-turn at the yacht club though. Is that right? Is that still on the table? Or there was a, you can see it in the other graphic.
Yeah, I don't know.
The DCI 2017 alternative audit. No alternative also. Yeah, we have options.
That right there, right?
It is on the table. We did test it in the alternatives. Mike, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, they would turn right, cut across to the left, and then use that U-turn to the south.
Does that keep the fast lane on the right side so it's hard?
Can we make sure, well, Mrs. Lane, I appreciate
blur.
your great questions. I just want to make sure the commission's first, but I think we were just going to ask what so if you could please give Celia a microphone so she can add. I just want to make sure the people online also hear your question because it's a good one.
Yeah.
With the U-turns, are all the options including I call it fast lane, I think you call it a fast T on the right side, so it makes it very difficult for people exiting Old Colony, because currently people can exit Old Colony when there is a red light and we can take that break to turn right onto Morrissey. With this green T, that doesn't give us lots of room to enter Morrissey Boulevard unless it's at off peak hours. So is there a green T there, and how do we get to the U-turn, and is there a way to pause the green T so people from the neighborhood could exit Old Colony onto Morrissey?
So the option that we're looking at right now is to not have the green T. This one, southbound Morrissey would stop when Bianculli Boulevard left turns are going, and also for pedestrian crossings. With the green T, which is the next slide, that southbound movement would only stop for pedestrian crossings. So there would still be some gaps, but not as many as just with the DCR signalized alternative. The virtually nonstop southbound traffic on Morrissey is an operational advantage, but it is kind of a disadvantage in other ways, both for ped bike connections and also for having those gaps to get in and out of Old Colony. So definitely something that we like hearing and consider moving forward in these options.
One option is acceleration, deceleration, or essentially looks like an on-ramp, but coming out of Old Colony Terrace, have its own lane that then merges into Morrissey southbound is something that could be looked at in this concept if it is one of the ones that moves forward. It's really about right-of-way in operations, and right-of-way is impacts or something that we're going to look at as part of our next step as well. Counselor.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jawan Skeens. I am a candidate for Massachusetts State Senate for the 1st Suffolk District. It's great to see a few of you in this room. Definitely just have a few quick updates. So definitely in regards to this setup, I definitely support neighbors. I like the third option, making sure neighbors are able to get out of Old Colony Terrace. Is definitely going to be key to, helping that intersection. Additionally, I think you guys had another Morrissey Boulevard at Victory Road presentation as well, right? When it comes to that, it's great to know that, well, I just want to say it's great to see that you guys are making improvements inside of this area in general. I want to applaud you guys in that space. You guys are doing a great job. Keep up the great work. The second thing is I want to make sure that we're increasing light timing when it comes to some of the traffic flow. I think, I'm not sure, did you say you were canceling the turn that's coming up Morrissey Boulevard turning onto Freeport Street? Did you say you were canceling that turn?
This isn't Freeport Street. You wanna? Unless you want to answer that, Mike, without the graphic, can you do that?
So are you talking about coming northbound? Turning
Yes,
left onto
yes.
Freeport?
Yes, so coming from the, was that this gas station, the 7-Eleven gas station, towards Freeport Street.
Yeah, so the northbound left would be prohibited in the median U-turn concept and the quadrant roadway concept. The median U-turn, you continue north underneath 93 and then make a U-turn and come back and turn right. And then the quadrant roadway, you actually turn right onto Victory Road, left onto Freeport. and then
Okay.
Straight through.
Okay, definitely will provide more of my thoughts on that. If I can get this presentation somehow via email, I can take a little bit more in-depth review. But definitely the timing of the lights is the biggest thing, is to help alleviate the traffic. Reducing any left turns for cars is going to increase the traffic flow inside of our community. So I feel like if we can stay away from removing left turns for cars and focus more on how we can address the blind spots, so that way we can actually see some of the bicyclists that are coming. I think that would definitely help, reduce not just, the pedestrian accidents, but also the traffic that's happening as well. The last thing I would say with any housing that is coming, I know you guys have a 2050 goal. 60% of inclusionary development policy is something that I'm in support of, to making sure that people who live here are able to stay here. So if we can just focus on that as part of your project, in addition to the timing of the lights and reducing the left turns, supporting the bikers, making sure that cars can see those bikers, that will be helpful.
Thank you. Good opportunity to say, the presentation is actually already online on our website. It went live earlier today. So we just want to let everybody know oftentimes we have to make it accessible and then put it online. It's online right now. So we're trying to get things out to the public sooner, I know it wasn't too far before the meeting, but at least now it's out there now that the meeting's occurred.
Yes, on the slide presentation, you have the commission discussion on Bianculli Boulevard, and you just list two alternatives. Is the DCR 2017 also an alternative? Why is it listed with the other two in your presentation?
That was just an oversight on the graphic because it's included in the operations analysis.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Ethan, I actually have another question. To Selena's previous point about coming out of Old Colony Terrace and taking a right. I think I heard you guys say you would almost wall off that right in order to prevent someone from, when the U-turn is closer, right? To wall off getting across the two lanes, you're speeding up, getting across two lanes, and to get that U-turn, you would have sort of dedicated walled off lane, right?
Yeah, like a bollard or some kind of physical, like a curb or something to prevent you from cutting over.
But I guess my question, would that help? I think there's other things that might hurt, but would that help in residents coming out of the back of Savin Hill not have to worry about a stoplight to allow them to enter, right? Because they should have no barrier to turning right.
That's right.
However, they now have to travel the Victory Road to go north. That's the trade-off there. All right, I just want to make sure that is, in terms of exiting the back of Savin Hill versus where you turn around, what the pros and cons are, because there would be a dedicated right-hand turn that would block off southbound traffic of Morrissey to allow you to get onto it, but just not allow you to take the earlier U-turn. Yeah, understood. I just want to make sure folks at home and the community audience understands that. There are some more questions from the audience.
Hi, my name's Donna from Savin Hill, and I just want to be clear, I'm a little confused. So when you're saying that you're coming out of Old Colony Terrace to take a right and you're going to block that off to take a right, are you are you shutting off or stopping the U-turn under the bridge at Freeport Street to go north? Why?
Let the experts explain. We'll take care of it. Thanks, Lynn.
Andrew knows everything.
Yeah.
No, but right now, we have difficulty getting out of Old Colony Terrace.
Mhm.
And one of my thoughts was to have a right turn only into Old Colony Terrace and narrowing the lane when you're going straight. Right now, it's very confusing. If you're not on the right-hand lane, you have to, based on whether you're coming out from the underpass to that set of lights to take a right, or you're cutting across, take a right. So wouldn't it make sense to try to direct traffic that if you're a right turn only, your straight on traffic has to move away from Old Colony Terrace? And to go all the way down to Victory Road to take a left to get back is unsustainable for anyone, I think, in the neighborhood. But second to that is to make a U-turn right near Old Colony Terrace, I think would cause a great deal of traffic and confusion. So there are some things that work right now. Is that the left turn at Freeport versus going to Victory Road. But there is a great deal of hazard coming out of Old Colony Terrace. We only have two ways of getting out of Savin Hill. And what you don't want is to have continuous traffic that's cutting through Savin Hill. And I would think that if you're going down to Victory Road, how does that prevent through traffic through the neighborhood?
So this concept here, alternative two, we originally did not have any kind of barrier here. It was just right in, right out on Old Colony. And we heard from folks that it might, based on, I think we both just understanding the area, but also a lot of traffic apps will do this, GPS apps. There was concern that not people from Savin Hill, people that are cutting through from points west, they'll use the Savin Hill neighborhood in order to go north on Morrissey. So they'll cut through Old Colony Terrace, come out, take a right turn out, and then quickly use the U-turn to go north. So in response to feedback we heard from the public, we, in this concept here, there's a essentially just call it a median, a Jersey barrier. There's different types of barriers, but just for the simplistic term, so that people exiting Old Colony Terrace would take a right, but the barrier would be extended just far enough so that they could not then hit the U-turn movement. And this was in response to feedback from the community that they didn't want potential cut-through traffic. So to your point, that barrier would prevent, in theory, cut-through traffic, but would also provide a circuitous route for Savin Hill residents that want to head north because they would have to go further south. Now, the two concepts themselves were developed separately, but because of the restriction that we put in this concept here, it would then interact obviously with the southern concept. So these are things we want to obviously hear and understand, because as we put these concepts together in a more corridor format, we want to better understand how they interact with each other and how people feedback from the folks. Understood.
Sorry, thank you. I'm not totally sold on that concept, and I really don't want a U-turn at the memorial.
We've heard that too, yeah.
And there has to be another way to generate a U-turn without going to Victory Road. I mean, and so how is it stopped? How do you continue the flow of traffic by eliminating the Freeport Street U-turn? How's that work?
Well, it takes a phase out of that signal. It just takes a phase out of that signal. So that left turn doesn't need to stop the northbound traffic, makes it a little bit more efficient, and it's also less pavement because you don't need the space for that lane. We just relocate those movements down to Victory Road.
I would
suggest that we those two lanes turning left on Victory Road and Freeport Street? Yeah, I would suggest two lanes, both turning left on Victory Road and Freeport Street that turn at the same time. I feel like that will help to alleviate some of the traffic that we're having. And what are we doing about flooding? I know flooding is a very big issue when it comes to this road. The U-turn potentially could help the Old Colony during those floods, Old Colony Terrace. But when it comes to the folks at Morrissey and Freeport Street, what are our options during the flooding? Are we just shutting down Morrissey Boulevard, or what's the goal there? Thank you.
Let's get a quick response to that, because I just want to be mindful of time, guys. And I know that I think Selena still has her hand raised. Mr. Walzak has his hand raised. Evan, right?
Through a
That's what I
combination
said,
of
Glenn.
raising the roadway and providing a berm or flood barrier, we intend to protect Morrissey Boulevard from future flooding so that it would remain open under all coastal flooding events forecasted.
Thank you. Why don't we, Mr. Walzak has a chance yet, and then we'll do Selena and Glenn. Thanks.
Actually, I was going to bring up the fact that before 9/11, there was a way of getting onto Morrissey Boulevard northbound without having to go past the UMass traffic light. And that was through the Boston Globe lot, which the Globe had a back entrance to it where people in the neighborhood would just go through there and then up to Morrissey Boulevard and then do the flip around the U-turn that took the Boston Globe trucks head north into on Morrissey Boulevard. I don't know, whether that's something, a possibility on there, but that parking lot is a really big parking lot. And maybe that could be some way of doing something like that. Although obviously it's not owned by the Department of Transportation. The other thing is that, we really haven't, in addition to K Circle, we haven't talked about the bridge and how the bridge kind of focuses or, is part of this. And you're looking at, whether it's a bridge that's operable, whether it's a bridge that's a permanent bridge that, that has a certain height, and also how all of the land gets built up in that area. So I don't know, how all that stuff works together, but I think it's an important element for maybe the next phase of this is to take a look at the heights of, whatever you're planning on, the berms and all that kind of stuff. And it may be a possibility of having some kind of turnaround that is either above the roadway or below the roadway or something like that if you're going to be building it up.
Yes, looking at berms and other climate resilience infrastructure is for final analysis. And the reason we're not showing beads in terms, it's not really tied to operations at this point. It's definitely much more about the climate resiliency side. Sorry. And one thing I thought about is that, we're here presenting everything that we've developed and with pros and cons. We're, to be clear as a team, we're not saying to anybody here that these are the ones that we want. So we're hearing from you as to likes and dislikes. So we're not saying we like this one or that one. Just trying to lay it out with pros and cons.
If it's okay, we got two people that have been waiting a long time online. We just hit them quick. John Lyons first. I think you're unmuted. You can go ahead, John. Don Walsh.
Don, you should have a notification on your screen to unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So look, I'm really disappointed. This process is driving me crazy. It's not what you people were supposed to be doing. The Columbia Savin Hill Civic Association put before Nick Collins, Frank Baker, Dan Hunt, and Dave Beal our concerns that the proposed and approved 10,000 new housing units and 7 million square feet of commercial activity in and around the Columbia Savin Hill neighborhood is going to cause huge problems. And what they did is they put together the state law that said there will be a Kosciuszko-Morrissey Boulevard Commission, which is what you guys are. You're not doing what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be taking a look at the impacts of 10,000 units and 7 million square feet and seeing, okay, what can we do to make sure that those impacts do not further increase the ridiculous travel problems we have during the peak periods in the morning and the afternoon. And what I heard one of you say today specifically is that your mission is to make Morrissey Boulevard a little bit more accessible or whatever. And you don't talk about, well, what's it going to do with everybody else and the timing of it? You are not doing your job, plain and simple. And John Fitzgerald, I would ask you to keep on top of these people. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, period.
Thank you, Don.
Hi, Selena again. You were mentioning that we were doing the U-turns to help alleviate the people who are trying to cut through going north to south. The only thing that I see that is on the U-turn going back north are UMass Boston and BC High currently. If people are trying to cut through Morrissey Boulevard coming from Kosciuszko Circle through Morrissey Boulevard, it's only to get back on 93. There's Mount Vernon Street that is under the circle. If that is developed for the cut through UMass traffic to enter into UMass, that will alleviate some of the necessity to put the U-turn there for the traffic that is at Bianculli to enter UMass. Because when I take the U-turn on the underpass on 93, there are not many people trying to take that U-turn to get back north in that area. So which traffic and which cut-throughs are we trying to alleviate by putting a U-turn somewhere between the Memorial and the Yacht Club? I don't understand, like, what is that traffic? Because there's Mount Vernon that's right there by the circle that will connect that.
Let me, Mike, you can definitely take the U-turn question. I just want to be clear, though. There are sort of two things we've been talking about. The U-turn movement itself serves a certain purpose. When we talk about like cut-throughs in the barrier along Morrissey, right here, south of Old Colony Terrace, that's to prevent cut-throughs from further west. So people coming from points west of Savin Hill, knowing that if they cut through Savin Hill and take right turn off Old Colony to Morrissey, but then weave over quick and then do a northbound U-turn movement. So that's one thing we've been talking about. A U-turn movement itself, that's typically to eliminate left turn movements at intersections, which are conflict points, but I'll turn it over to Mike, our traffic engineer, to give more detail.
Yeah, I mean, that about covers it. It is the left turn into UMass and also the U-turn to access BC High, like you said, and properties on the east side there. It's just to get the left turns and U-turns out of the Bianculli intersection itself.
Yeah, so this is one of the reasons why I think that alternative 2 is not tenable, because it's going to be so much traffic. It's everyone waiting to get into UMass, unless maybe we do something creative with Mount Vernon, which speaks to the point that everyone's been making, that looking at K Circle and including this, that would be not only a good idea, but also necessary for this commission to do. Somehow it's always the next meeting, to Don's point. While I have the mic, I just want to actually compliment MassDOT and DCR, because I think the short-term improvements are looking really good. I think they're better than I would have expected due to the good work of Mary and others in the community. I'll also say that the car aspects of this are getting better. Obviously, we have some work to do on this particular slide that everyone's talking about. But I would challenge the MassDOT at the next meeting to talk about everything except for cars. Could we do one meeting with no discussion of cars?
No, but it'll be heavily focused on other things besides cars. It'll be on many other things, so.
But that's kind of the problem, right? this is supposed to be a comprehensive look at the.
Correct. So you can't just eliminate cars from the conversation. You have to look at everything together. So that's why our comprehensive. look.
Totally agree. It's just as a thought experiment, it might help because the balance has been so much onto what the cars do.
I shouldn't have been so curt. Yeah, I can
Yeah.
appreciate that, but we have a limited number of meetings and so we really have to sort of, it, yes, it's sort of an exercise of looking at something like that, but we have a limited number of meetings that we're trying to get to an endpoint. So the next meeting will be a lot of other things that we have for metrics and analysis, but it will have to be balanced with the vehicular, but also active modes, bicycle, pedestrian, transit access. So it's going to look across all modes as well as other things like environmental, public health, safety, things like that. So,
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So we have a couple of sign up names. I know we've already had some folks speak that were on the sign up. John Rich, Bill, did you already speak? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, there was a couple others that have already spoken.
John, why don't you go ahead?
Oh yeah, sorry, God, John.
Yeah, going back to the earlier, one of your earlier slides, for, it was, sorry, for the 2050, try to get right to it. Doesn't matter if we go back to it.
Build or no build.
Yeah, the build and whole build. One of the key objectives is to try and reduce traffic on Morrissey Boulevard long term. And it's great. I think the the geometry and the details you're working on are good. Going to work out the details, but I'd like to find out if the on the next level view of this, if DOT is considering possibly putting a electric bus line on Morrissey Boulevard to make a connection between JFK, Ponce Circle, Gallivan Boulevard to Dot Ave to Ashmont, which would help local people access the building, the services that we're routinely trying to get to via Morrissey Boulevard. And also, is there any thought on making a ferry, harbor ferry node near JFK, say, take a sliver of land on the north side of Dorchester Bay City and putting a ferry terminal in there so you will walk from JFK and get to ferry service to Logan Airport or other points in the harbor.
To answer your question directly, no, we hadn't considered those, but thank you for those ideas. That's something we can take back and.
Okay.
We'll add that MBTA is also part of the management committee that is running this project.
Please feel free.
Hey, it's me again. Glenn, I promise I'll make this quick. And it was just relevant to Donna's and others' points on the Bianculli, or excuse me, the old Colony Terrace thing that we've talked to death at this point. But I did download the slides, and actually zooming in on that, I think it actually answers a ton of the concerns we have. So maybe just at the next meeting, we can really blow up that map because it's just impossible to see the details on these slides. But I am actually seeing that the turning from Morrissey onto Old Colony is actually a protected, isolated lane in this plan, which is really nice. And I'm seeing that actually the quote unquote Jersey barrier is sort of located, it's only on the farthest left lane, which also makes more sense to me than how I was kind of conceiving it based on this comment. So maybe we just help the discussion next meeting to really blow up some of these intersections so we can really see what's going on there. Because I think actually it looks like it's actually a little better than it sounds like. And I sort of, I'm very much on the pro, like let's make Morrissey, less attractive to so many cars side of things, but I still want to see it work well. So, that was just my comment on that, I guess. And obviously this was like the intersection I cared the most about and have been chattering everyone's ears off at the meeting for. So just wanted to say like that actually looks way better when we zoom in on it. So maybe just next time we can really like get those details out there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and that's again, part is to flesh out these alternatives on a more corridor basis. And so thank you for the comment. If you blow up or closer looks on certain sections would be probably helpful. Understood.
I think given time, do we have any remaining questions on the other sections or general overall questions? We didn't really have a chance to dive into more of the Freeport and Neponset, but
Do we want to?
We do have some online questions.
if there are online questions, sure, how many?
4, maybe 4 or 5.
Can we maybe read them all? Are they written or are they?
They're written.
Yeah, why don't we just read them all off and try and rattle off some answers as we go?
The Freeport from Heidi. The Freeport Street graphic is very confusing. The arrows pointing in the wrong ways and also the abbreviations.
Duly noted.
We'll look at that. Thank you.
John Lyons, who didn't get to speak, but understanding the double bike lane standard, can we request a waiver in this instance to preserve space for one dedicated separate vehicle lane to accommodate both emergency vehicles and possibly a future reversible signalized bus lane. Additional bike lanes from Freeport Street to Neponset Circle are redundant since the Neponset Trail is nearly complete, running on a parallel route, accessible 1 block from Morrissey. I think that's it.
Right.
Councilor Fitzgerald, we have a couple of signups, just 2 or 3 left. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, great. So John Rich, we already had, Bill Walsack already spoke. Bill Varnell. Okay, Glenn. Selena. Somebody wrote over.
She left. She was here. She asked.
Okay, great. So.
Bobanus, I had a question about her. It seemed like there was a statement relative to the left turns for going north from onto Freeport Street that you would have to go through a couple of cycles and made it sound like it would worsen things a little bit, but the things are already a couple of cycles. So I don't see how that's really helping things out.
Thank you. Understood.
Just preparing for the next upcoming meeting. When does the Morrissey Boulevard climate resiliency project get reviewed for environmental impact? What phase? Is it in the design phase or development?
So as part of our study, we are going to look at environmental impacts. But it's also in a future project development, it will be further deeper looks at different environmental impacts. We look at a conceptual level, but we will be bringing that to the next meeting. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Great. Past the 8 o'clock mark. I know some people are leaving, but I think we've got, are there any more? There's no more on the list, right?
We're good.
Public comments are done then. Is there any next steps you'd like to announce? We don't know.
We have one more online, Maria Lyons. I guess that's the last.
Go ahead, Maria.
Letting me come back. You never get to the other end. Next time, can you start at Neponset Circle and go back the other way? I live in Port Norfolk, and we are, whether you're walking, biking, or riding in a car, we are totally dependent on Morrissey Boulevard. And it would be really helpful if we had a Conley Street connection in and out north and south to get in and out of the port, because we're really worried that the situation is bad. It's bad really now, but it's only going to get worse. So if that would be considered, we would appreciate it. And also, I'm really worried that the traffic coming off the bridge going straight across is going to cause a huge backup on the south side of Morrissey Boulevard at Neponset Circle. And that's where the fire engines come to get over to Port Norfolk. So that's a big concern of Port Norfolk as well. And just repeating what other people have said, it'd be nice to keep the 3 lanes, put in a dedicated bus lane, you'd still have room for a bike lane on either side, just going in one direction, north on one side, south on the other. There's plenty of room on Morrissey Boulevard. And please, please, keep acknowledging the Neponset Greenway. It's pretty much a block in. So that's, can be used as well. So thank you for getting back to me.
Thank you, Maria.
No, I think with that, we're going to come to a close in 1 minute here. I just want to know, we don't know when the next date for our next commission meeting is, but as soon as we find out, as usual, we'll blast that out and let everybody know date, time, location. I think some things that were not gone over today, and I understand this was the modeling of the traffic, and so that was sort of the essence of this one. But K-Circle update, Beeds Bridge itself and what the plan is for that, and of course, financing. And if there's any update on sort of how are we going to pay for all this, right? I think those are just three things that we'd like to either even just have mentioned or whatever you have on it. I think it's important to keep the community as up to date as we can. And those are things that we didn't get to talk about tonight, and I understand why it's important to have to dive into these details. But other than that, if there's anything closing from MassDOT at the moment, I think we will close this commission meeting as of now. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and we'll let you know when the next commission meeting is. Thank you.
Thank you.